Hello everyone, I'm Giancarlo Espinosa and I drove from Key West, Florida, so I'm gonna make this good. We need to stop preventing citizens of the United States of America from participating in the political process. People who have paid their debt to society deserve their right to vote. Everyone knows that a disproportionate number of minorities are affected by this. This clearly allows the voting population to be determined and undermined by racism. Florida, we need to stop preventing a population of our citizens from expressing their political views. Yes, I'm talking about felons who have paid their debt to society. We need to open the primaries in the state of Florida. This is about a third of voters from ever getting a chance to get to vote for the candidate that they like. If I ever ran for office, I would feel truly guilty looking at people in the face and telling them that you have to join one of the two major political parties in order to ever have a better chance of seeing me on a general ballot. Believe it or not, there's a very good reason that people, especially in this day and age, are not wanting to join one of your political parties. We need to open the primaries.
Hi, my name is Lisa Austin. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have lived in Florida for 45 years, so I consider myself a native. I've watched the state change drastically in that time, both for good and for bad. Despite our considerable growth and the influx of people from all over the globe, we often still hold on to a very provincial worldview in our politics. Your job is immense. You can choose to guide Florida to the next step, or to hold us hostage to a misguided nostalgia and extremist political views. Florida will only move backwards if extremism continues to guide our legislative process. The people of Florida have made it clear. They want fairness and openness in government, and that starts with elections. We need open primaries. The people of this state are unified by one overriding concern, that special, powerful interests and wealthy donors make the rules and the will of the citizens are ignored.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Farbo Taranian. I have voted in every election since I've been registered at age 18. And one thing that's always bothered me every election is the fact that we live in a closed primary state. To me, that is a very anti-democratic system. And I'm very grateful to say that I actually work for an organization called Progress for All that actually recently conducted a statewide poll with open primaries, a national leader on election reform, as well as Florida Fair and Open Primaries, a grassroots organization dedicated to enacting open primaries in Florida. So a couple stats from this poll, which you guys can check out at progressforall.org if you want some proof, is 74% of Floridians want independent voters, 74%. That's 27% of the Florida electorate. That's a large chunk, included in primary elections. And 73% of Floridians, now this includes supermajorities of Republican, Democrat, and independent voters, want the Constitutional Revision Commission, you guys, to put an open primaries initiative before the voters. That's the people talking, that's not just me. Okay. Also, 73% of voters believe taxpayer-funded primaries should be open to all voters. Now, the parties have asserted that as private associations, they should determine who can and cannot participate in primary elections. You know, I could understand that argument. That's a fair argument, I'd say. But primary elections are paid for by Florida taxpayers and administered by state and local election agencies. So that argument is null and void in this state. Okay? So, you know, I bring this up because we just dealt with a crazy 2016 presidential primary election, which drew claims of a rigged, quote-unquote, process and saw 26 million independent voters across this country, you know, and that includes 3.5 million Floridians that were unable to participate in voting. That's not democracy, guys. We can do better than that.
Thank you.
A couple of things I'd like to talk about, I guess. I'll start with open primaries. We're just one of 14 states that have closed primaries. This past election, for example, 3.2 million registered independent voters in Florida were barred from voting. That's a quarter, that's 25% of the state's registered voters, just kind of insane if you ask me.
Primaries, the open primaries, and I wanted to see if there was a way that we can add this to the Constitution where independents like me would have the ability to vote for people that may not necessarily be in a particular party or whatever.
Closed primaries, I'd love them open. I am not Democratic nor Republican, so I can never vote in them, and it really bothers me that I cannot vote in them.
I've been active in my own personal political beliefs for a long time. I don't go around and try and convince other people. I pulled up some statistics to try to make my point. Voters in Florida used to be Republican and Democrat, one or the other as of 30 years ago. And over the last 30 years, 25% of voters now are independent because they don't like the Republicans and they don't like the Democrats. And the trend is going up. So to me, that says that both parties are failing the voters of Florida. I think the presidential election is a prime example of that. When, as a father, I talk to my children, I'm ashamed of our presidential election on both sides. When I talk to my friends and my colleagues, I don't hear people saying, I like this candidate or that candidate. I hear, I hated that candidate more. And that is just abhorrent to our political system. It is just, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare, so I'm just kind of going off the cuff. I know that there's going to be a lot of people in this room in particular that's going to support one candidate or the other with very strong convictions. I'm going to go by the majority of Americans that I talk to and I see in polls and everything else, if you believe those, of course, that are just disgusted with the political process in general. And I know that we as Florida voters can only do what we can do in Florida. But as a swing state, one of the most important swing states in this country, we have a lot of say about who gets nominated to the primary process. So you can't have people swinging to the hard right and left to get their core constituents. So I would like to see an open primary in Florida so that the primary candidates will go towards what the majority of Americans are. They're moderates. They're willing to compromise, unlike our politicians in Washington. I'd also like to say with my 29 seconds, there are 22 other states that have some type of open primary. And I certainly hope that, you know, y'all put aside partisan politics and put aside special interests and you look out for the voters in Florida.
I moved to Florida in 1989, at which point the first thing I wanted to do was register to vote. I went to register to vote and I was told I had to choose. I had to choose Democrat or Republican. And so I said, well, I don't want to choose. I want to be no party affiliation. Is that an option? Sure, you can do that, but you know you can't vote in the primaries. I'm like, what? Where I lived before I could. So that upset me a little bit. So as someone who refuses to choose sides, I feel disenfranchised that I cannot vote in the primaries. So I would really urge you to consider whatever it is you can do to make open primaries available. So like the other gentleman, we're not forced to choose a side when we're not happy with those sides.
A bigger and more important way would be to implement, to change our primary election rules. Our Constitution was last revised on the subject in 1998. A sort of fix was proposed where, and I took advantage of this, on my Florida House district over in Winter Garden, no Republicans decided to run. I'm a registered Republican, so before 1998, I just would have had no primary vote at all, and then the Democrat would have been unopposed. I got to choose my favorite Democrat as a registered Republican. However, in the race, you may not know this, some of you may not be from this area, the race for the Ninth Circuit prosecutor, no Republican decided to run again because the Democrat incumbent was very popular. However, a Democrat challenger not only showed up, but paid somebody to be a nonpartisan write-in, which is under Article 6 of our Constitution, Section 5. If there are other candidates, the primary becomes closed again. And I did not get a chance to vote for state attorney, and many other people did not. And I have a proposed revision to said section in this envelope.
Okay, thank you.
So on the primary process again, so instead of having just somebody get the plurality of votes, we should, if somebody doesn't get the majority plus one, 50 plus one, we should have a runoff election. The top two contenders in the primary for the presidential candidates should run against each other.
Hi, my name is Cleve Josephs. My main issue here is open primaries and restoration of voter rights.
The other issues that would go towards voter enfranchisement, as has been mentioned a few other times here today, the end of closed primaries.
Raquel Lozano.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raquel Lozano, and I am here to discuss about the voting process. I am for an inclusive voting process. For no person should be excluded from the process, which includes felons, the elderly, minorities, and anyone that is not affiliated with the Democratic or Republican Party. Florida has 7 parties to choose from, and the number of no party affiliation is growing drastically. So I hope that you all consider that and go for an open primary instead of a closed one, so that way we can include more people.
Thank you, and could we...
I'm advocating in favor of open primaries. I feel it's extremely important to be inclusive of all voters of Florida. I can't imagine us being able to call ourselves a democracy here while we exclude 3.1 million people like we did in this last election cycle. And we have, as we all know, the definition of gerrymandering, where politicians essentially pick their voters so that we can have safe seats. I feel that what are the parties, the two major parties, afraid of if they're going to, are they afraid of their policies, or are they afraid of voters having different ideas than the established ideals of each of our two large parties?
It's possible.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Palm Beach County. I'm State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg, and I'm here to ask you to put an end to the worst election scam that exists today, the write-in loophole. In 1998, the CRC put an amendment onto the ballot that said that if all the candidates in a race come from the same political party, that everyone gets to vote in that election. Voters in 1998 overwhelmingly passed that amendment into the Constitution with 64% of the vote. Despite this, the Division of Elections decided that a write-in candidate serves to close a primary, thereby disenfranchising thousands of voters and essentially rendering the 1998 constitutional amendment null and void. Since then, millions of Floridians have been deprived of their right to vote in elections that matter a great deal to them. And both sides do this. They put up these phony write-in candidates that don't pay a filing fee, they don't submit petition signatures, they don't submit a disclosure form. In fact, their names are not even on the ballot. Today, our political candidates are so brazen about this that they file their papers during qualifying week, often with a write-in candidate in tow. This write-in candidate is often a friend, a supporter, or even a relative. There's a local elected official, in fact, who has recruited her own mother to run against her as a write-in candidate for the last 3 elections. Now, I realize the arguments on the other side that, hey, only Republicans should vote in Republican primaries and only Democrats should vote in Democratic primaries, but that's not what the voters wanted in this one circumstance when all the candidates in a race come from the same party. And the will of the voters has to mean something. You know, democracy has to mean more than gamesmanship and manipulation. When I was in the state Senate, I tried to close this loophole and came close, but it's hard to ask politicians who benefit from the system to change the system. But you have that power. Please honor the will of the voters and our democracy itself by closing this destructive loophole.
My name's Deb Oaks-LaGrone. I live in Niceville in Okaloosa County.
I didn't bring any notes. I'm here to talk from personal experience. I am asking you to add a constitutional amendment for open primaries. When I moved here 2 years ago, I was unaware that you had to register as a Democrat or Republican in this state in order to vote in primaries. Sadly, I didn't find out in time to vote in the primaries. Our primaries are paid for by public tax dollars. So why should any portion of our voting constituents be left out? There are over 3 million independent voters in this state, and it's the fastest growing group among your constituents. So again, I ask you, please add a constitutional amendment for open primaries.
Mr. Day, speaker number 15.
My name is Frank Day from Point Washington, Florida, in South Walton. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and particularly Commissioner Stewart, for graciously sharing your table with us a while ago. You notice I didn't have a cookie, so if you don't have plans for that chocolate, have it.
We got more.
Okay. I want to add to Deb's comments about open primaries. Government works best if we all get a chance to participate, and I think all of you will agree with that. The more than 3 million that she quoted that aren't allowed to participate in the process simply because they aren't members of the majority parties. And that doesn't represent us as individuals or our state in general. So open primaries is something that we all deserve. We'll all benefit equally from it. We've been reduced for the most part in the minority to having to address our government through constitutional amendment initiatives on the ballot. And over the years, I've been involved in 3 that have succeeded quite well. Fair districts, clean water, and most recently medical marijuana. And they passed by substantial majorities. So open primaries is something we absolutely must have.
Hello, my name is Christina Forrest. I am a veteran and a registered voter in Florida since 2000. I am a registered Democrat, currently living in Navarre, Florida, in Santa Rosa County. I implore you, we need open primaries. Myself and every other registered Democrat that lives in Navarre were recently disenfranchised, and the ability to vote in the election for sheriff. Chairman Burr, you said that the vote was the most important thing. Due to a loophole of write-ins, due to a loophole in write-ins, myself and every other Democrat was not able to vote for sheriff. That's wrong. That is wrong for me. That is wrong for every Democrat. That is wrong for every absentee ballot. That is wrong. Fix it. Open the primaries. Fix it. I implore you.
I'm Frank Rayner. I'm here representing independentvoters.org and Fair and Open Primaries. And I've been a lifelong independent for 40 years. And I've watched the independent evolution occur. And what I've watched is independents go from low teens representation to now 25% in the state of Florida. And I hope you realize that this evolution is occurring, that you realize that it's going to continue, and that independents are starting to flex their political muscle. In particular, when you understand evolution, you realize that there's 2 possible strategies. There's cooperation and there's competition. And unfortunately, independents have recognized that competition has become the model that has evolved for our political system. But we do not accept that. We want a cooperation model. Now, independents have engaged in cooperation. We have 2 initiatives that we have gotten on the constitutional ballot, open primaries and fair districts. We have done that. We have done all the time and effort that this commission is doing to achieve those 2 constitutional amendments. Unfortunately, the political system has come to us with competition. And how so? The legislature has adopted the write-in, I'll call it scheme, to close open primaries. We want some resolution of that and get back our open primaries. Second, there's the sore loser statute that has been adopted by the legislature that does not allow a candidate in a primary to switch over in the general election to an independent status. We think that should be undone. Independents want the greatest selection of candidates when they go to vote. If you're not going to let us vote in the primaries, then present to us at the general election the greatest selection of candidates. And so that is, if you want to know what independents want. We want a political system that involves cooperation, a political system that provides us candidate selection.
Just coming here as a concerned citizen, Duval County. Went to school at FSCJ, well, FCCJ before it was FSCJ, and then graduated at UNF. And all throughout my years of being in school, I find that the one base that we all stand on is voting rights. And I really feel that opening the ballot, opening the primaries to allow anybody to vote for anyone, no matter what party affiliation they're with, is the way we need to go. It'll allow us to see the actual views per candidate, and people won't just vote for which party they want to vote for, just to vote for them.
Please stop. I'd like to take this time to thank you, members of the commissions, for being here and being positive and open-minded when listening to the citizens of Jacksonville promote their fair and open primaries in Florida. My name is Kristen Kiernan. I've lived in Florida my entire life. I work in the dental field, and I'm a registered Democrat for the time being. Open primaries in Florida will give the voting opportunity to over 3 million citizens in Florida alone that do not have it in the primary election. Open primaries will give that right, not just a right, it should be our civic duty to vote. Earlier this year, I attended an independent conference in New York. Nationally, over 40% of the electorate are now registered NPA. Open primaries will cut the gerrymandering and give the people what they want. The independent movement is not new. This has been going on for a very long time. It is now moving faster than ever. We need the primary election to be just as open as they are publicly funded. It is in the best interest of our state to validate our growing population of NPA voters with a voice, and open primaries is the way to cut out the partisan voting process and bring back the voice of our people. Independents are growing, and we need to be prepared by redesigning our voting process. All but 20 states have open primaries, and Florida needs this voter justice. Why ostracize the NPAs and the other minority party voters from the elections? It's not only our right, it is our duty, and we should be allowed to do it. Do the right thing and allow the voters in Florida to decide upon the open primaries on the ballot. Florida could be the trailblazers and for more free and open elections to ensure that our elected officials work for the voters and not their parties. I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for putting this into consideration.
Main reason I feel that we should have the open elections for the primaries, because when we're kids, our parents tell us to be ourselves. You know, they tell us to stand up for what we believe in, to be true to who we are. And the very first lesson we're told when we turn 18 is you have to pick a side. You have to pick a color to be your representative. And I feel that that kind of limits us, because not everybody believes in the same thing that the party stands for. I believe in some things that Republicans are okay with and some things that Democrats are okay with. But nobody really covers the whole spectrum. So by limiting me to only be able to vote for certain people because of what it says on my voter registration card is kind of, it seems un-American, if you ask me. That's pretty much all I have to say about it.
My name is Leanne Gustavus. Thank you for being here and thank you for having us. I have been a resident of Florida since I could vote, and since then I have been registered as an independent, mostly thanks to my father, a very vocal libertarian in the Clinton era. So you can imagine. Growing up in a household with ideas swirling around that didn't adhere to the two-party system, I think it instilled a sense of importance and reverence for independent thinking. The idea that you can vote for a candidate that aligns with your issues that concern you without regard to the party that they subscribe to, I believe is inherent to being an active and involved citizen in this country. Partisan primaries are designed to advance the interests of political parties They do nothing to advance the quality of our democracy. To the contrary, they inhibit the participation of candidates who do not have party backing. This type of primary reduces turnout, while open primaries increase participation. Parties are not fundamental to American democracy. In fact, the founding fathers detested them. Parties have no business running what is fundamentally a public function, managing elections. Public dollars demand public elections. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We must support free and fair elections that make it easier for people to vote. Open primaries.
Mr. Treadwell?
My name is Ray Treadwell. Here in Jacksonville, much of the controversy in last year's election cycle revolved around the so-called closure of party primaries by one write-in candidate. Many voters understandably felt disenfranchised by closed primaries, and I have no doubt that you will be asked to remove this write-in loophole. But if this commission decides to revisit Article 6, Section 5B, known as the Universal Primary Amendment, I would ask that you do much more than simply address the write-in loophole. The Universal Primary Amendment passed in 1998, but 2 years later, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision that I strongly encourage you to read. The decision, California Democratic Party versus Jones, was a 7-2 decision, and it seriously calls into question the federal constitutionality of Florida's Universal Primary Amendment as it stands. You heard me correctly. I believe the current version of Article 6, Section 5B is likely unconstitutional. The essence of the Jones decision is that a political party has a First Amendment right of association to choose its own nominee without the participation of non-party members. I studied the First Amendment and election law at Yale Law School, and my recommendation to you is either commit fully to open, nonpartisan primaries in all elections with the top 2 candidates advancing to the general election as necessary, or revert back to closed party primaries that respect our First Amendment associational rights. You may be asking, if this 7-2 Jones decision is so convincing with respect to the unconstitutionality of forcing political parties to open its primary, then why hasn't a court struck down Florida's Universal Primary Amendment in the intervening 17 years? Well, courts are not proactive. Judicial review requires that someone first file a lawsuit challenging the law. And believe it or not, no one has filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Florida's Universal Primary Amendment. So if you keep the status quo, be warned that someone in the next 20 years probably will file a lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treadwell.
Hi, thank you to the Commission and everybody here. My name is Luis. I am part of the immigrant community here in Jacksonville. And as of yesterday, I was sworn in as part of the Democratic Party here in Duval. As such, I am part of this great amount of people that has gotten involved in the political process since last year. And the reason why I wanted to speak to you all today is because I want you to help us reform our party and all the parties here in the United States. And the best way to do it is to have open primaries. Because it doesn't matter how many friends I talk to, they're going to tell me, well, I'm going to have to register as a Democrat as of today, but what if I don't agree with the candidate that you guys are going to push? And I say, well, I need you to do it just so that next year you're going to have the chance to vote. And it's really an impediment to all the young people that has getting involved into the process in this last year.
I'm Carolyn Wolf from St. Augustine, Florida, and I'm here to talk about Florida fair and open primaries. I want to tell you, thank you all for doing this. And I want to tell you that I've had an exceptional overview of primaries in these United States, having been able to work on the Bernie Sanders campaign. I was in a position to work with voters across the country as they encountered problems casting their votes during the primaries. And without exception, every state that had closed primaries had the biggest problems. And the biggest problem was that you could not switch your voter registration easily. It prohibits people who have to work long hours or work far away from where their central location is to change their voter registration to be able to get there in order to do it. In St. Johns County alone, we have 41,000 Dems, 40,000 independents, and 92,000 Republicans. You can see that makes it an unfair advantage for the voters of St. Johns County, Florida alone. If they had open primaries, people would be able to vote their choice, and we currently do not have that. Furthermore, we have 217,919 population in St. Johns County. Only 543,724 voters. That leaves 325,805 people that are not voting. If you truly want voters to be able to vote and participate in government, you must open the primaries so it's available to all these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jackie Bowen. I'm here representing Florida Fair and Open Primaries. I just want to thank you all for letting me speak. Thank you for your work. It cannot be easy. And thank you for this example of civil discourse in our state. I've lived in St. Augustine for 11 years. I'm a retired dean. I'm a current college fundraising consultant. I ran a publishing house. But some of the most interesting things I've ever done is I worked on the political system last year, and I found more about our process of government than I have in any civics course that I ever took. What I learned is, it seems to me, we're captured by a system that prevents millions of people across the country from voting in our primaries. 3.1 million no-party affiliates in Florida alone, that's a quarter of our voters. Additional information, NPAs are the fastest growing segment of our electorate, outpacing growth in both the Democratic and the Republican parties. 74% of Florida voters want NPAs included in primary elections. 73% of voters, including Democrats, Republicans, and NPAs, would like you all to put an open primary initiative on the ballot next year. I grew up thinking we were a country, and I learned this, in which each person had an equal vote. But now it seems you only have an equal vote if you're a Democrat or a Republican. Parties seem to have a chokehold on voters in Florida primaries and in many closed primaries throughout the country. In closing, please consider putting an open primary initiative on the ballot in 2018. Take a look at our presidential candidates in the last election. By opening the primaries, maybe we could have had better choices. Thank you so much. Thank you.
But I have concerns. As an active voter, I want open primaries. I want to know that I can pick what candidate represents me, not who a party says should represent me. No party owns my vote. No party owns my voice. And my Constitution in this great country, in this great state, should protect me for choosing what I want and not force me into a category. So I'm asking you guys to stand up for the citizens. You are the powerful ones. You have the opportunity to present change for all of us to be empowered. And so I'm asking you guys to do that, to open it up, to encourage people to have their voices heard, and not let any party or any interest group own us or own our country.
I'm a regular folk from Duval County, retiree, 74 years old, and I'm here to advocate for Florida fair and open primaries. You see, in my view, democracy is a constant evolving process, always in search for the common and greater good. With that thought in mind, therefore, I believe that having all candidates on a single ballot and all voters choosing candidates regardless of their party affiliation will bring us a step closer to that goal, the common and greater good. Because we all contribute with our tax dollars to the primary process, we should all as well participate in said process. In my view, the constant growing discontent with the performance of both major parties is a contributing factor for the constant growth of independence and the non-party affiliation sector, and unfortunately, increasingly leading to an undemocratic government by the minority. I cannot imagine anything better than an inclusive electoral process to prevent that from happening. Leaving out of the process way over 3 million voters, as we know happened in the last election, in my view, is greatly detrimental to our democracy and our state. Thank you for listening, and I hope you thoroughly consider open and fair primaries as a viable alternative to strive towards the common and greater good.
Thank you.
I was the chair of the Student Organizing Committee of the Future of Florida Summit at the University of Florida's Bob Graham Center for Public Service. For the summit, more than 120 students from 25 colleges and universities around the state gathered at the University of Florida from February 10th to February 12th of this year to participate in the summit. The summit focused on the Revision Commission, and participants attended breakout sessions on education, elections, the environment, and the judiciary, working with panelists to come up with amendment ideas. In all, 12 student groups presented amendments, and 3 amendments were chosen for submission to this commission. They are to do as follows: increase the mandatory retirement age for judges and justices from 70 to 75, eliminate the write-in loophole in elections, which allows write-in candidates to close primaries that would otherwise be open and allow all registered voters to participate, and then change elected constitutional officer positions in non-charter counties to nonpartisan.
Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Houston. I'm an unpaid volunteer for Florida Fair and Open Primaries, as well as Progress for All. On March 12th through 14th of this year, we surveyed 735 registered voters in the state of Florida. This information has been submitted. Here are the key findings of these polls. 92% of Florida voters want their elected officials put in the interests of Florida voters ahead of their own political parties. 93% of the same voters want their elected leaders to bring opposing interest groups together to create good policies for the state of Florida. 87% of voters support electoral changes that expand democracy in the state of Florida, not inhibit. 74% of Floridas want independent and NPA voters, over 27% and growing by the minute of the total electorate of this state included in the primary election processes. 73% of the Floridians, including a supermajority of Republicans, Democrats, and independents and NPAs polled, want this committee to put an open primary initiative before the voters in 2018 and clear and transparent processes in collaboration with the League of Women Voters. 74% favor a top 2 open primary where all candidates appear on the same ballot regardless of party affiliation, and all voters are able to vote for any candidate, with the top 2 moving towards a general election. We not only believe this is necessary to give all voters equal access, but we believe this will force candidates to appeal to a broader base. This will in turn will result in less partisanship and better policy making. 73% of the voters believe that a taxpayer-funded primary should be open to all voters in the state.
My name is Laura Spears. I'm from Gainesville. I am a lifelong iconoclast, graduate of FSU, but I work at UF. I am an independent voter, lifelong. I've voted in 9 general elections since 1984. I've voted for 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 independents, and I wrote 1 candidate in. But I'm not unique. In fact, Florida has increased in diversity of voter registration since 1998, when Article 6, Section 5 was adopted, mandating closed primaries. Independents make up almost 3.5 million of registered voters. That's 27% of voters. This is tripled since 1998. 2 parties dominate, though, and our population is increasingly diverse and cannot be represented unless we have greater choice. We are a diverse state. Our state would benefit from open primaries where the 2 parties can fully be scrutinized by all voters. Right now, 3.5 million people are disenfranchised in primary elections in Florida. In some states, one can register for a party on election day. Please consider some of these alternatives. Our diverse large state needs flexibility and a system that truly enfranchises all citizens. This is just one example of electoral changes that are needed in Florida.
I registered to vote as soon as I was old enough. That was in 1970, and I was 21 years old.
I really didn't know enough at that time about the two parties that make up our representation to make an educated and informed decision about which party I wanted to affiliate myself with. But since at the time I was working for an answering service that was owned by State Senator Dan Scarborough, who was a Democrat, I registered as a Democrat. As I got to know myself and as I learned more about the world we live in, I came to realize that the Democratic Party was a good fit for me. It remained a good fit for many years. But, just as we all do, I continued to grow and mature. I continued to learn more about the world and the important impact politics has on global events. My perceptions, my beliefs, and my attitudes changed as I experienced life. I found I was no longer so resolutely in the Democratic square. The square I was in was altering shape, was growing to encompass and include ideas from both sides of the aisle, ideals from the back of the room, from outside the room, and down the hall. As the years passed, I became more and more disillusioned with the two-party system. I wanted to be able to pick and choose the person whose principles, standards, ideals, and ethics best represented my beliefs, and I was unable to identify completely and wholeheartedly with either of the established mainstream political parties. I began to consider myself a moderate, and I wanted to be independent of any party affiliation. I wanted to be able to cross the aisle or go out of the room if I needed to find the person who would carry my standard. I have said all of this to get to this point. Every natural-born citizen and every naturalized American citizen should be allowed one vote in every election held on a local or national level, regardless of which party or not they are affiliated with.
Hi, my name is Steve Huff, and I would like to thank each of you for your service and thank you for hosting a hearing in Panama City. I'm representing Florida Fair and Open Primaries. We're an all-volunteer, non-funded, grassroots organization of independents and NPAs seeking electoral reform of our primary process. We have had members speak at every hearing thus far because we simply want to be allowed to vote in the primaries without being forced to join a political party. I had a 2-minute statement prepared, but I opted to print a copy for each of you, and we will be submitting specific language to you for your consideration at a later date. I would rather spend time today talking about some of the people you have already heard from. There's Michael Weinbaum, who spoke at the first hearing in Orlando. Having only learned about the hearing the day before, he took off work early in order to speak with you. Blessed and Wright then drove from Homestead to speak in Miami. In Boca Raton, Alex Boardman was concerned about bringing his young daughter to the hearing, but she behaved beautifully and stole all our hearts. The Petronas boys are close second. Christina Forrest drove all the way from Navarre to attend the Tallahassee hearing after it was moved from Pensacola. Frank Day drove from Santa Rosa Beach, and Deb Oaks Lagrone drove from Niceville. These three were so eager for you to hear their message, they refused to wait for a time and place more convenient for them. I believe Frank and Deb may even be joining us again today. Andy Houston made quite a splash in Gainesville, and Kristen Kiernan rounded up 4 friends to testify in Jacksonville, and they were joined by several others. Among those were Jackie Bowen and Carolyn Wolf, who drove up from St. Augustine. We are hoping for a good turnout again today because we're passionate about this issue, and we hope that you will listen carefully. Thank you for your consideration.
I'm hearing impaired, and I'm a lip reader, so this makes it difficult. But several of you know me for quite some time, 20 years, as a representative of people with disabilities, presidential appointments, gubernatorial appointments out the Union. I've been busy for the last 28 years. But anyway, what I'm coming about for 2 reasons. For myself and other people that have presidential appointments or gubernatorial appointments, for the primary election to be not a closed election, but an open election. When I took my oath for the President Bush for the U.S. Access Board, I promised to not participate at a particular party. I represent all people with disabilities. So when you have to, in the primaries that are closed in certain states, you have to declare a party, or you don't get a ballot, because I do everything by absentee with all my multiple disabilities. We encourage people with disabilities to do absentee ballot because it's so difficult to get in to vote. The biggest thing, we had 50 million non-registered disabled citizens in the United States last year. We could not get them to register because they said, primary, I have to declare a party. You told me I had the right to vote. Why do I have to declare a party? So I'm asking that Florida make it an open, not a closed, for all the disabled and any other person that feels that they're franchised against for voting, but especially the disabled community because they don't feel they have their voting rights. And for all the people that represent large communities, such as the disabled or whatever, that have taken an oath to represent all of them and not declare a party. Thank you.
I'm one of those non-politically affiliated people.
Me too.
Okay, and I don't care that I have to join a party to vote on stuff that's important to me. Such things as sheriffs and other things, because I'm locked out. Just because he runs and is elected by his party and there's no opposing one, he should still have to run in the general election. Is due to the fact that if we're locked out, he's not fully elected by all parties. We need an open election in this state, that if I am a registered voter, I can vote anytime I want to. As you see, I am a retired military person. And for many years, it all hurts when I come back from this dirty war. And that's what I thought I was fighting for, to keep people free, to be able to vote.
Hi, I'm Margot Fullalove. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you regarding the Florida Fair and Open Primaries. I'm glad we have a lot of support here today. I have lived in Florida since 2004, but my father is retired U.S. Air Force, and he moved here in '68 and lived in Bay County for 25 years until he passed away in '95. So I have a long attachment to Florida. In fact, my parents were good friends of the Petronas, so it's nice to see you here, Jimmy.
Thank you, ma'am.
I retired 3 years ago, and I had spent 35 years in IT. I lived in Colorado, I lived in Illinois, and I came to Florida, and I've always been a registered independent voter and have voted in every election possible, but have been excluded from primary elections since I moved here, and it's very frustrating. I wish to be able to vote for candidates of my choice regardless of party, therefore would like to see the Florida and other state voting laws revised so the independents can vote in primary elections. I feel that many elections, especially local elections, are decided or significantly influenced by primaries. Non-party affiliated voters have increased to over 64% since 2004 to 2016. Florida, the average is less than 23% turnout in primary elections. In 2016, most open primary states have a much higher voter turnout than Florida. So it is not uncommon for local elections to be single party. Therefore, an independent cannot vote in the primaries. They are denied the right to vote. There are 3.4 million independent and minority parties that can't vote in major party primaries unless they're registered with the party holding the primary. Over half of young voters, millennials, identify as independent voters in national surveys. We shouldn't be locking out the next generation of leaders from participating in our political process. Open-style primaries averaged over 37% in 2016. I believe that Florida needs to join other states in growing trends towards open-style primaries. So thank you for your consideration.
Yes, my name is Frank Campus. I'm a retired engineer. And let me say, I'm just proud to be an American. This is great that anybody can come in here and just voice their opinion. And some of these things are important, but compared to the rest of the world, I think we're way ahead. I'm happy 99% of the time. I just got two little issues, and it's been mentioned before. I was born and a resident of Alabama for most of my life. I've been Democrat, I've been Republican, and then I was independent. I'm independent now. I've tried to vote for the person. Okay. When I was in Alabama on a primary, I could go in, and the day of the election, they give me, you just declare if you're a Democrat or Republican, you get your vote. Okay. And I don't know how many states that's done. I was really shocked when I voted the first time as a resident of Florida 15 years ago. And I'm not a felon. I've got 2 speeding tickets 30 years ago. Okay. And that's about it. I'm not a mayor. I'm just an average old retired guy, and there's going to be a bunch of other people coming down. The culture's changed. Y'all aren't young people. The Democrat and Republican parties, I agree and disagree at times. I don't think it's fair to me that I can't vote in the preliminary. That's all I'm saying. Y'all don't let Alabama be a better state than Florida. Okay?
I'm speaking again on behalf of open primaries. We've had several speakers tonight addressing this. Having spoken in Tallahassee, I realized when I got home that I hadn't provided any concrete information. So today I did a public records request of our supervisor of elections, and I'll provide this to staff as a perfect example of the abortion of our election process, where a candidate comes in and qualifies at the last hour of qualifying as an NPA in what would ordinarily be a universal primary, and locks everyone else out of the process until the general. So if you're not a member of that party, you're totally locked out. Now, this particular candidate, very wealthy business owner, comes in, as I said, in the last hours of qualifying, makes one campaign contribution to her account the entire season, campaign season, writes one check. Then the supervisor, realizing they've overcharged this candidate, reimburses $800 of that back. And then a series of 13 waivers. Absolutely no campaign activity whatsoever, and has in effect aborted a majority of the citizens' rights to vote. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We need to address and correct this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Good afternoon and welcome to Lee County. My name is Rayanne Wessel, here on behalf of the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, proudly celebrating 50 years of conservation of resources in this region. I come to you tonight. Here in Lee County, we have had a significant disenfranchisement from voters because of closed elections. We're up to 60% of our voters may not be able to participate because of partisan elections. So we encourage you to take a look at that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Second issue very quickly, so that everyone is represented here. Hopefully you'll consider very strongly a nonpartisan election process. Thank you.
Sum up. Hi, my name is Leslie Turner. I would like to thank the Commission for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in Lee County. I live in Parker Lakes in Fort Myers, and I work as a medical technologist for a large Catholic hospital. I'm also a wife, a mother, and a breast cancer survivor. I have 2 points I would like to comment on. The first has to do with open primaries. At the moment, Florida only allows Democrats or Republicans to vote in primary elections. This leaves out 25% of Florida citizens from participating in the election process. And this is unfair because it leaves out so many people, many of whom I've spoken to, but it also unfairly targets the younger voters, as they are the largest segment of the population registering as independent. Therefore, I ask the Commission to allow all voters in Florida to decide this issue by putting an open primary ballot amendment in 2018.
I'm speaking to Article 6, suffrage in elections. The requested action is to amend the sections governing closed primaries, and that we become an open primary state. Basically, the cornerstone of democracy is being able to vote. That's to have the voice, the opportunity, and the ability to tax down tyranny, as well as allowing for equality. So I appreciate your attention. Godspeed with you as you travel around to the rest of the 67 counties in Florida. Thank you for your attention.
Go ahead.
Ms. Fletcher.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for being here. My name is Joyce Fletcher. I have been the Voter Service Chair with the League of Women Voters of Collier County for more than 8 years. I want to address Article 6 of the Florida Constitution on suffrage and elections. During the 2016 election cycle, there was much distress that there were many voters that were disenfranchised by write-in candidates. The Constitution, as a result of the last CRC, allows all registered voters, regardless of party, to vote in a primary when all the candidates are of the same party. However, when there is a candidate of another party running or a write-in candidate, the primary is closed to only registered voters for the party of those candidates. Unfortunately, many of the write-in candidates who do not pay a fee to file or qualify, do not campaign, do not raise money, do not attend candidate forums, really only enter the race to close the primaries. I understand that one of your members experienced this situation during the last election cycle, as well as our state senator and 2 representatives in Collier County. The issue needs to be addressed. 3 possible solutions might be. One would be open primaries. Another would be in Article 1, Section 1 of Article 6, it says that write-in candidates cannot be faced with a greater requirement for registering than those in the larger party. Maybe we need a minimum fee for those who register as non-party. Maybe we need all candidates who appear on the ballot from the same party to appear in the primary.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
My name is, excuse me, my name is Tracy Gagnon. I'm a resident of Fort Myers, Florida. And the reason I'm here today is because there's too many voters in Florida that are being denied their right to vote in the primary elections. Last year, 3.5 million voters were not allowed to vote in the primaries. That's a lot of voters. That's 1 out of every 4 voters that weren't allowed to vote in the primaries. And that's a lot of voters that paid for those elections that were denied the right to vote in those elections. If the Democrat and the Republican parties are private entities and get to decide who gets to vote in their primaries, then they should pay for it. It seems rather unconstitutional to have us pay for the elections and then not being able to vote in them. I moved here from New Hampshire in the late 90s from an open primary state. I had no idea what a closed primary was the first time I went to vote. I was registered as an independent. There was nobody on my ballot, and that's how I learned what a closed primary was. And the election I was interested in voting in that year was for sheriff. I can't even believe that a sheriff is a partisan election. Where I'm from, I don't know what our sheriff is, whether he's Republican or Democrat, and I don't know why that would matter for a sheriff. The other reason I'm here today is because usually it works for me. I just switch to Republican or Democrat, but last year I wanted to vote in the Democratic presidential primary. Well, I also wanted to vote for Jason Mon. And in my opinion, Elizabeth Benaquisto cheated when she had one of her supporters register to run as a write-in candidate and disenfranchised me and other voters from voting in her election. So I hope you can allow the voters to decide on open primaries and to close the loophole on the write-in candidates. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Hooper, actually. The 2 O's, not 2 P's. Fun fact, there are 196 countries on the planet. The United States is but one of them. It has the shortest constitution in the history of man. That constitution takes about 30 minutes and 30 seconds to read. The United States is also the longest lasting constitutional republic in the history of civilized man. One of the things that's missing from the U.S. Constitution is mention of corporations. The other thing that's missing from the U.S. Constitution is mention of political parties. And now we have corporations that are political parties that are running everything. I suggest to you that there's something fundamentally wrong with that. A lot of the speakers that have come here today have spoken to you about the need for open primaries, that when people vote, their vote should mean something. When they pay taxes, they should have the ability to elect the people that represent them. Until and unless you find a way to allow them to do that unfettered by political persuasion, by corporate influence, by political parties, we will never have that. And we will just be one of the other 195 countries. Thank you.
Brandon Pearson.
Good evening to the Constitutional Review Committee. My name is Brandon Pearson, and I'm a recently registered voter here in Lee County. Shortly after turning 18, when I went to register to vote, I was uncertain if I wanted to declare my party affiliation at the same time. At the national, state, and even local level, we have seen partisan divides cause discontent. And personally, while I lean to more conservative values, there are times where I recognize the need for more liberal principles. I believe President John F. Kennedy said it best. Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. It was this mentality that made me desire not to declare party affiliation. But the reality is, in the state of Florida, this can be very dangerous. At present, the state of Florida is only one of 11 states with a closed primary system. This has prevented the over 2.8 million registered voters that have no party affiliation from voting in partisan primaries. Even in cases where only candidates of a single party are running, an independent write-in candidate, a single individual, can close an entire primary and prevent voters from having a choice. Ultimately, this has excluded millions of voters from across the great state of Florida from having an equal voice in the election. It is this reason why I believe that the Constitutional Review Commission should place on the 2018 ballot an amendment to establish either a semi-open or an open primary here in the state of Florida. I believe that this will expand voter participation in partisan races and allow for a more fair and equitable election. Thank you for your time, and I hope for you to consider installing in either a semi-open or an open form of primary elections. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Leaf. I'm a physician who retired this year, and I've lived in Florida for 27 years, 19 in Lee County. I am here to advocate for open primary. Thank you so much for allowing me a voice today, especially since I feel that in our current system of closed primaries, as a voter registered without a party affiliation, it seems like I am often denied that voice. I do lean left of center in my political beliefs and consider myself a politically informed person, but have never given money to a party or a candidate because I feel the system is so unfair. Yes, you heard me. I'm a doctor, and I have never given money to a doctor PAC. I do contribute to organizations such as Project Vote Smart and Common Cause that work for a more fair political process. An open primary in Florida would be a step in that direction. 25% of the registered voters in Florida have no party affiliation. This is true in my county also, which votes strongly Republican. Closed primaries deny citizens who are actually paying for the primary elections and are registered voters from being able to vote. Both the voters with no party affiliation and the local minority party, as in a county like Lee, are denied a meaningful voice in who their political leaders will be. This leads to more polarized candidates who know that they do not have to pay any attention to the majority of the people in their constituency. This is not fair. This is not democracy. Let's not pretend that the concept of a universal primary contest solves a problem. There are ways to gain that, also well used by both parties. Please help us stop the suppression of so many of our voices via our most fundamental right as a citizen, our right to vote in fair elections. I plead with you to put a constitutional amendment on the Florida ballot to allow open primaries. Thank you.
My name is Melissa Butler, and I'm a retired professor of political science, and I appreciate your being here and letting us see the political process in action. I'm not fully retired, though. I still teach American government in the summer in the People's Republic of China. When I'm there in Shanghai, I try to teach Chinese university students what democracy is and why it's a good thing. I tell them about government of the people, by the people, and for the people. and about the value of full political participation. But I feel just a little bit hypocritical when I reflect on how our own system often fails to measure up as a democracy. And there's two things that come to mind that you folks could address. And they've both been mentioned already. One is the move from closed primaries to open primaries. My Chinese students understand the idea of only letting party members vote, but that's really not democracy. We can do better than that.
Okay. Hi, Cheryl Lee. I'm a native Floridian. I live in Northport, Florida currently, about an hour north of here in Sarasota County. I came here tonight with my 20-year-old daughter who recently had her chance to vote in her first presidential election. And between my husband and I, we have 3 daughters, 2 of which are voting age, and a young son. And in our home, turning 18 comes with a voter registration form in your face at sunup. We regard registering to vote as a major milestone and an important privilege, and we raise our children to understand that the seemingly simple act of voting was fought for, and our right to vote should be respected so as to respect those who struggled and fought for that right before us. When my daughter registered to vote at 18, still in high school, she wasn't comfortable with labeling herself as a Republican or a Democrat, so she registered as an independent. And the conversation went something like this over the next couple of years. Hey, Mom, I can register. Yay, can I be an independent? Yeah, absolutely. You're an American. You can register for whatever you feel you resonate with. So fast forward a little bit, presidential primaries come along. Yay, I'm registered to vote. Can I go vote? Oh, no, sorry, you can't vote. All of this important stuff we've been talking for the last couple of years, it doesn't apply to you as a registered voter. It only applies to people who registered to vote in another way. So it's pretty clear to her and to my other daughters that there is voter discrimination. At least that's the message that they're taking home with them after registering to vote and learning that the tight and unfair restrictions that still exist for anyone who falls outside of 2 narrow options. So please open Florida's primaries to all Florida registered voters.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Don Jacobs. I live in Lehigh Acres. I've been a resident here in Lee County for about 14 years now. I'm a former paramedic, and I drive a bus for a living. The topic that I came to speak on tonight has been pounded pretty good tonight. The issue that I wanted to speak to you about this evening is open primaries. It's been said much better than I can many times, but politicians created the problem. The parties and the politicians benefit from it. They have no incentive to change it, and the only way it's ever going to be changed is if you put it to the voters, and that responsibility lies with you. You can change that. One of the figures that was mentioned was 25% of voters are disenfranchised with open primaries. Well, actually, that number is higher, because here in Lee County, it's primarily a Republican stronghold, and if you are a Democrat, as I am, by the way, I didn't mention that, I'm a registered Democrat, but I don't really agree with everything the Democrats do, but that's why I'm registered. Anyway, independents are locked out, but also the minority party. So the number's not 25%. It's more like half, or better than half. So really, the minority is running the show, and that's not the way it should be. That's not representative government. The senator that represents me in this district right now, the real election was the primary. That's where the campaigning went on. That's where the candidates attended forums, debated. Okay, I'm running out of time. Anyway, please support open primaries. Put it to the voters. Let the voters decide. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elise Mysells. I'm a Land O'Lakes resident and a Florida resident for 47 years. I'm retired and I'm a registered Democratic voter. Thank you for holding this public hearing. I stand before you today to expand on just one of my proposals, open primaries, on the basis of fair and just elections in our state. To begin with, primary elections are publicly funded with our tax dollars and are not private elections. They are administered by government employees in public polling places using public-owned voting machines. So I ask, why are tax-paying citizens being locked out of the primaries? Is this fair? According to the Florida Division of Elections website, over 3.1 million Florida voters are registered with no party affiliation, and over half of our young voters identify themselves as independents. So I ask, why is it a requirement to join a party in order to vote in the primaries? Is this just? Every taxpayer's dollar has the same value, but that's not what this rule supports, and political parties claim to be private associations. Instead, our government has become all about what's best for the political parties, not the people, and locking so many people out of a public election is neither fair or just. I propose that we bring Florida into the 21st century. Only 9 other states in the U.S. have closed primaries like Florida. We need open primaries so that our politicians have to answer to all our voters. We need open primaries so that our next generation of leaders begins participating in our political process. We need open primaries because the present constitutional language allowing independents to vote in primaries is being circumvented by inserting bogus write-in candidates. I propose that this commission put an open primary amendment on the ballot, and I will leave you with just one final question. Is it fair and just to let the politicians or political parties who are doing the bidding decide if we want open primaries or the taxpayer voters of Florida? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nina Tatlock, and I'm here to advocate for democracy in the state of Florida. I think our nation was founded on the premise of being a democratic republic. We need amendments that will open the vote to allow everyone 18 and up to participate. We need automatic registration, open primaries, automatic restoration of felons' voting rights after they have served out their sentence and punishment. We need publicly funded campaigns. I also think ranked choice voting is a good idea. We need to remove all barriers to the ballot box. There are a lot of people who are not corporations who are showing up here, and we need to let them all participate in our elections. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
My name is Francisco Pierre Lewis, and I'm a student here at Hillsburg Community College. I didn't just come here as a student, but I come here as a concerned citizen, considering the fact that we don't have, open primaries to open the, basically to have everybody involved to make sure that we could have an actual democracy in the state. Now, another thing is that there is a lot of corruption, and one of the things that I have here is a Anti-Corruption Act. Basically, what that includes is not just open primaries, but ranked choice voting, so that people could rank in order based on who they want to vote for. It removes the spoiler effect, and it really alleviates all the tension that divides us, not as a state, but as a nation.
Frank, Carl.
Hi, I'm Danny Dahlberg.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for your service. I'm requesting 3 changes to increase citizen representation. First, I ask that you close the write-in loophole in elections. Candidates get someone to run against them as a write-in, effectively limiting those voters that can participate to their party. By the time it gets to a general election open to all registered voters, there's really not any choice at all. If you won't close the write-in loophole, open the primaries. At the end of last year, almost 27% of registered voters in Florida were third party or independent.
Go ahead.
My name's Penny Hunter, and I'm talking today in support of adding open primary for Florida. I've been a Republican for over 45 years, and I can't imagine why we've closed our primaries and not allowed about half of our population to vote. Not everybody's a Republican. My husband's a Democrat. I think he has a right to vote too, and since many of our elections are decided in the primary, and we have had so many people that have signed up to be a write-in candidate who never show up in the district to even show their face, and the only reason they've showed up at all was just to close the primary, so Democrats or independents wouldn't have the opportunity to vote. And I think that's wrong, and I think you should change it.
My name is Mark Reedon. I grew up with open primaries in Wisconsin. I was a moderate Republican. The ballots there allowed us to vote for who each of us liked best in the primaries for all the parties. However, I was always more moderate than Republican. Recently, I have found very few moderates to vote for in the general election. Many of us tend to cherry pick our news from the internet in such a way as to reinforce our pre-existing beliefs. Since the internet provides an abundance of news sources, it is very easy to be caught in this echo chamber. Closed primaries can have the same effect, allowing views to become more extreme over time. One of my degrees is in mathematics. There exists an entire mathematical discipline allowing us to understand the effects of open and closed primaries. It's called game theory. So you should ask yourself, are you tired of severe partisan animosity, of extreme ideologues and special interests gaming our system to attain positions of power? Would you rather govern with reason and logic and with needed compromise instead of hewing to political dogma? Then you must support open primaries. I understand that elections are a popularity contest, but governing should not be a political war. Allow moderates to compete. Be a moderate. Let Florida lead our country toward a brighter, more reasonable future. Open primaries can help save us.
I also stand with those who support closing the write-in candidate loophole, which undermines the fairness of our election system.
Yeah, hi. I'm Blenny Whalen. I'm a mom, grandma, volunteer, a college professor, and a nurse practitioner. In my work, in my career, I've never really thought of it as a career, but a service. And I feel that my job is to treat my students or my patients in the best way possible, one that is the right thing to do, and to listen to their opinions. I'm not an elected official. For those of you who are, your job is to represent, is to be of service, not a career. It shouldn't be considered a career. It should be considered servicing people. And sometimes that means going against your own opinion because you're listening to what the people and these wonderful people are saying here. Also, open primaries, and I would also like to see that nobody gets elected if they don't have 50% of the votes. And then that means that sometimes there has to be a runoff between the top two. I think if you can't get 50% of the population, you shouldn't be elected.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for hearing us today. I am here, I'm a new graduate and a master's degree in nursing. Over the years, I have voted Republican, Democratic, and Independent. I'm a 34-year resident of Pasco County in Florida. And it has become very apparent to me that our government and our electoral system has been taken over by those who seek profits. They optimize control over our elections in hopes of winning. Our rights are being squeezed. These actions continue to disenfranchise certain groups of voters. It's become an art form honed with each election by both major parties. Even when citizens want to support their party locally, they're blocked.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Marianne Akey. I'm a Tampa resident, born and raised, and a lifelong Democrat. I came here to speak on open primaries. Many eloquent other people have raised the issues as to why it is such an important issue in the state of Florida for the commission to put an amendment to open up our primaries to everybody that has the right to vote by our Constitution. Our Constitution did not say you can only vote if you're a Democrat or you can only vote if you're a Republican. If you're an American citizen, you have the right to vote in this country. And it's not an issue that should even be brought before a commission. It's just common sense that we all have that right to vote. And as I said, I listened to all the problems that we have in our state. If more people are brought into the process to vote, a lot of these things would go away because more people would be able to be our elected officials, not just a Democrat, not just a Republican, anyone. This lady here should have as much of a right to represent the people of this state as anyone, not because she's a Democrat or because she's a Republican.
Lewis?
Yes, good evening, and thank you to the members of the Commission for holding these hearings. My name is Sharon Ballack. I live in Lutz. I'm a retired state college administrator and high school science teacher. I've lived in Florida for 28 years, and I'm a registered Democrat. I am here in support of open primaries in Florida. I believe that no American should be required to join a political party in order to exercise their right to vote. According to a study conducted in February 2017 by the League of Women Voters Florida, more than 3 million Floridians who identify as no party affiliation were disenfranchised during the 2016 primaries and denied a voice in the election process, granted them by the U.S. Constitution. In Florida, elections are paid for by the taxpayers, including those who were locked out of the process. Additionally, under the closed primary system, elected officials are often persuaded by narrow party bases, while other constituencies and viewpoints are excluded. In the 2016 primary, less than 24% of registered voters decided who would represent the other 75%. An open, nonpartisan primary would require all candidates to appear on a single primary ballot. All registered voters would participate, and the top 2 winners would move on to the general election. Candidates would then have to reach out to all voters. States with open primaries have found that open primaries create more competition, increase voter participation, and create a more productive and representative legislature. Again, referencing the League of Women Voters Florida study, between 2004 and 2016, there was a 64% increase in non-party affiliated registered voters. 40% of these voters are aged 18 to 34. If Florida is to remain a thriving, technologically advanced, and economically vibrant state, we must reverse apathy and low voter turnout and actively engage the next generation of leaders in the democratic experience.
Thank you, Mr.
Hi, my name is Donald Kiernan. I'm from Clearwater, Florida. I'm a retired machinist. I'm married to my beautiful wife for 37 years. I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. I'm here today to express my concern for Florida independence. I want a nonpartisan primary election according to the in my opinion, Florida independents want a nonpartisan primary election. According to the Florida Division of Elections, over 3 million Florida's voters are registered as no party affiliation. I am. That's 25% of our electorate, and they're barred from voting in the primary elections. Now, due to past gerrymandering by both parties, safe districts still exist for both major parties. And unfortunately, most of the races are decided in the primaries instead of the general election. I'd like for all Florida citizens who are registered voters to be able to choose their candidates rather than political parties doing it in the back rooms. Regardless of your party affiliation, to appear on a single primary ballot with all voters voting for their preferred candidates in the primary, then the 2 top candidates will advance to the general election and, if needed, a runoff. In closing, please change the loophole for the major parties and return the power back to us, Florida registered voters. This commission has a responsibility to the voters of Florida, and you have the opportunity to right the wrong that's gone on for the last 20 years.
it's up to you guys. Thank you very much.
I also stand in support of open primaries, especially closing the write-in loophole.
Open primary. I got 4 words for you. Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. The least popular of all time.